am back with another Wednesday devotional. This last Sunday, I spoke about how God wants to transform us to be more like Him. And He often uses the periods of change or transition or difficulty in our lives as an opportunity to make that happen. And in that message, I mentioned the story of Peter, and there's some really good things in the story of Peter that we can learn about what that process of transformation looks like for us. And if you look through the story of Peter, his story of transformation, it took time, and it wasn't always moving in one direction. Let me give you some examples. So Peter becomes a disciple of Jesus. He walks with him. He learns. You get that moment walking on the water, right? Jesus is walking towards the boat, and Peter steps out onto the water, and he walks for a bit, and he starts to sink. And that's your first kind of glimpse or hint at how Peter is someone who will say big things. He will want to do as much as he can, but when it comes to following through and being completely faithful and strong, man, he has a hard time with that. And so there's that water or walking on water moment. Then later there's the famous, Jesus is talking about his death. He predicts that Peter will deny him, and Peter, of course, doesn't believe he will. He says that he will die with Jesus if that's what it takes to not leave him. And of course, Jesus says, "Well, no, actually, you're going to deny me." And when that moment comes, Peter does deny Jesus. And then after Jesus is raised to life, and he leaves and he gives the Spirit to his disciples, Peter is the one who gives that big speech and kind of kicks off the church in Jerusalem. And so you get this moment where Peter is like, finally he is standing up in front of other Jews, other people, and he is proclaiming Jesus in a way that is kind of like, right, it takes faith, it takes strength. He's actually doing it. And there's different stories of Peter. But then there's one other part that I wanted to share, and it's actually in Galatians chapter 2, verse 11 to 13. Let me just find it here for us. So Peter, or actually, and this isn't a letter that Paul is writing to the Galatians, but this is what Paul talks about. He says, that he has met with church leaders, including Peter and James and John, in Jerusalem, and they talked about the fact that that Gentiles were in, and they didn't have to behave like other Jews in order to be considered a part of the church. Jesus didn't need that anymore. But here's Paul talking about Peter in Galatians 2, verse 11. He says, "But when Peter came to Antioch, I had to oppose him to his face, for what he did was very wrong. When he first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers who were not circumcised. But afterwards, when some friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of criticism from those people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. As a result, other Jewish believers followed Peter's hypocrisy, and even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy." Now, this is likely after at least one time where this could be after the large church conference that is held in Acts 15 that we read about. It could be before that. People disagree. But what you get here is that at least one time Peter got together with other Jewish believers and other Christians saying, you know what? Gentile believers don't have to obey Jewish laws. They don't have, like this, that's not what being accepted by God is based on anymore. But here, when it came down to it, and there were other Jews that Peter was meeting who did believe that that's how things ought to be done, again, Peter didn't stand up. He was afraid of what they might think. He was afraid of the consequences of his actions or what he might say, and he didn't do it. Now, we know from the early church that eventually Paul and Peter were reconciled, and some believe that they were actually crucified together in Rome at the same time. And so they did make up, and Peter seemed to move forward. But his whole story of transformation isn't like, he became a Christian and then things just got better from there. He just, it's a one-way street. No, he's moving back and forth. He's making the right choice, but then he's falling back again. And we all do this. I don't think anybody, meets Jesus, makes a decision for him, and then it's only one way after that. It's a struggle. And we're not always going to make the best decisions when it comes to our transformation. But I think God stays with us. He continues his work in us. Even if we step back, he's committed to that work of transformation, and it's going to be our whole lives. Actually, depending on what you believe, our transformation may not even end at the beginning of new creation. God may continue to be working in us and showing us new things even after heaven comes here to earth. And that, for me, that idea is incredible and exciting. I think the overall point here is it's not about how far you transform into Jesus here in this life or that you make all the right decisions. The point is that you don't give up. The point is that even if you fall back in following Jesus, doing things like he is, making those decisions a habit inside yourself and becoming that new person, you're not going to do that perfectly, but you can always continue to move in the right direction. So don't give up. No matter how, discouraged you get or how difficult this particular season of transformation is for you, it's not about that you get it all right all the time. The point is that you continue to trust in God and you continue to move forward into what he has for you, because he is going to bring you as far as you are willing to go. And if you're willing to go as far as you possibly can, then you will get there in this life or the next. God bless.